which position do you feel better about in terms of depth if they go one way in the first round? Well, that's okay because they can find a really good player in round 2.
It's a ridiculously deep defensive line class, so it's not even close. It's defensive line. Donnie, it's pretty shallow at wide receiver, honestly. You know, you have McMillan, Burden, Ibuka, and Golden as your first-round talents, and then after that, there are some guys. You know, there are some guys like I talked about, but it's not like past drafts where there was just guys galore and you could get a legit good receiver in the 4th round. I don't think you're going to find many of those guys in this class. Defensive line, though, you can find different body types. You can find noses. You can find 3-techs. You can find 5-techs. You can find hybrids all the way up and down the draft board. It is probably the deepest defensive line class I've seen in a long, long time. And so this defensive line group is really deep. And so if you don't get, you know, a guy in the first round, you can get a guy like Darius Alexander in the 3rd. And so that's just a unique thing because usually, you know, Darius Alexander would be a top 50 pick. I imagine when you start seeing, you know, some of these draft experts drop their top 50s, you know, here could be as much as 15 defensive tackles in that group. It is that deep of a group. And there's not going to be 15 defensive tackles that go in the top 50. So they're naturally going to get pushed down a little bit. So defensive line is absolutely the position the Steelers are going to be able to wait on if they want to, or they can double dip on it.
Do you think they would double dip on it?
I do. I think it's a real easy position to double dip in this class. You're going to find guys in the 5th round that are going to be legitimately good rotational pieces. And I don't know what style they're going to want in a first-round defensive lineman. I don't feel like drafting a nose tackle in the 1st round is particularly good use of resources. And so, you know, if they're going to draft a guy in the 1st round, you feel like it's going to be a guy that's a Cam Hayward-like placement. And so they can easily follow that back up in the 5th round with a nose tackle, a run plugger. And so that, to me, is absolutely very possible. They need youth on this defensive line. Given Cam Hayward's not getting any younger. Larry Ogunjobi's probably not back. Keanu Benton, I like Keanu Benton, but he's just one man. And Isaiah Loudermilk's a free agent. Don't think Dean Lowry's going to be back. So they need youth in depth anyways. So, yes, I do think double dipping at defensive line makes a ton of sense for them.
So just based on logic with how deep that defensive line group is, I feel like if they have a shot at a top-tier receiver in that 1st round, take one then and then worry about defensive line after that.
I think it could be that. I also think they want one of those blue chippers because, you know, I talked about that group of 4, Grant, Nolan, Harmon, and Williams. Those 4 guys probably in most classes are going earlier. In this class, they're not. I think that's kind of rare. And so you might have the ability. It's very similar to tackle last year, Donnie, where think about all the tackles that were in that class. Steelers could have waited and gotten Roger Rosengart. They could have waited a little bit and gotten Blake Fisher. Both these guys had good rookie seasons, and it was down the draft board at tackle. But they might want a blue chipper, and I think that might be their thought there. And wide receiver, you know, is a position we're going to have to see what happens. You know, what happens with George Pickens? Who do they sign, trade for, whatever? I think that's going to be a big part of that kind of equation. And I think they're obviously going to need to add somebody or somebodies to free themselves up to take that defensive lineman. But as we stand here right now, I think what your logic is very sound because you're going to want one of those top 4 guys. And the Steelers should have one of those guys there. You know, I don't really foresee a scenario where one of McMillan, Burden, Ibuka, or Golden are not there. They're 4 very different players. I don't think McMillan actually has a chance of getting to the Steelers, but the other 3 do. All 3 of those guys are very different players, and so it's going to be kind of what the Steelers want, but they need kind of that top-end receiver talent. And so I very much agree with you right now as it stands here. Receiver is the way to go if you're taking it from that depth perspective.